What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Acceptable Accuracy Podcast. This is your host, Tyler.
This is your co-host, Felipe.
I mean, technically, you are true. That is correct. So, what are we going to be talking about today, Philip? Or Felipe?
Felipe. I don't know why Felipe. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about training tips for new shooters. This is a subject that I know is close to your heart, Tyler, and something that I've got experience with as well. And I think that most people who have, I would say, like anywhere from 3 to 5 years under their belt, and again, some people have accelerated that, should be able to introduce new shooters new people into shooting.
I agree. This is something that I know Phil and I of course, we've been doing a better job at pre-planning our podcasts. And for those who are listening, I think you've also noticed our new upload schedules. We've been uploading pretty much our goal has been every other week on Tuesdays, just so this way it could become a little more manageable on our end, especially with the holiday season. But this is something that we've been talking about now probably for the past week or two. And it's something that is really near and dear to my heart, probably because as a pastor, I teach. Like, I love teaching people. I love teaching the kids of my church. I love teaching other people. I love really, especially that one-on-one time, kind of like that discipleship, I guess. And this is something that I'm really passionate about. I'm really excited to talk about because I was just there, 4 years ago. I remember what it was like being a new shooter. And it's crazy to even think I've been in this space for 4 years now. And I guess I would consider myself beginner plus now. I'm not a true.
No, you're beyond that, Tyler. I would definitely say that based on your skill set and the ability to shoot the matches that you have shot, I would definitely put you into the advanced category of shooter.
I don't know about that. I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I'd say
it depends on your scale, right?
I'm like upper intermediate. I think I'm like upper middle class, man. That's where I'm at. I'm upper middle.
You shot the Zombie Invitational. I think that puts you in advanced because not everybody can do that.
Which is crazy for me to even think about. But either way, so once again, this is a really important topic that I like to talk about because, I mean, we've spoken about this too. We live in America and we have our God-given rights to protect ourselves and to protect others. And this is something that we want to be able to empower new shooters to feel confident, skilled, and of course, safe. So that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So I guess for the first part, we're going to talk about the foundations of safe shooting. I remember Phil and I, our first time shooting, this was probably, 3 years ago, I think, Phil? Somehow you and I got connected. Somehow we found out we liked guns. I think it was actually from my previous coworker. He introduced us. And first one day you're like, "Hey, Tyler, like I have a membership at this outdoor club. So let's go and shoot together." I said, "Yeah, let's do it. I'd love to," because at this point, really my only experience has been shooting at an indoor range, doing as many drills as I could in an indoor range. And then I think I shot at a buddy's house here and there who had property, but I never actually got to shoot at like a club with berms, multiple targets, USPSA targets, etc. So I remember you and I were shooting, and you gave me a compliment which I very much appreciate. So you actually mentioned this to your wife. Do you remember what you said about me when we shot together?
Probably that you were very handsome. That sounds like something I would say.
That is not what you said, but okay. So, in all seriousness, do you remember what I'm talking about? This was 3 years ago, so I don't know if you remember.
Oh man, okay. So I don't remember specifically. If I had to guess, and I'm okay with guessing because if I get it wrong, I'm not going to feel too bad about it.
Yep.
Typically, if I give somebody a compliment around shooting, it's usually that I usually say a couple things. Usually, I feel confident in shooting around them again going forward. Typically around being safe around the individual. or a lot of times if somebody, especially if they're shooting pistols, if they're being accurate, I'll say something around that, but I'm not sure what the specifics are. I apologize, Tyler. I do not remember.
You're good.
And now I feel horrible, and I almost feel like I should disconnect from this podcast.
Oh my goodness, it was 3 years ago, man. But I get it. So but I do remember this because this is something that I prioritize, and this is something that it is really important to me because I feel like this is something that is a myth that we can debunk later on as well. And that was I was a safe shooter.
Oh, see, I was right then.
You were right. That's exactly what
Yeah.
it was. I
Yeah.
knew how to
Yeah.
manipulate my weapons. I wasn't flagging you, and I followed the 4 universal firearm safety laws. And that's something that I want to really focus on, especially early on, and really focus on moving forward. And I think a part of it too is because I think at this point I already went. I do remember specifically I went to a buddy's wedding at another state. I'm not going to name it because if my buddy's listening, he might remember this happening because it wasn't him, but it was his buddy, and I got flagged by an AK. So it was a loaded
Nice.
AK.
Wow.
And this is a guy who claims to be super experienced country boy, has been shooting guns for pretty much over a decade, and my my other buddy and I, we both got flagged by a loaded AK. And I think that really just solidified in my mind, like, yeah, I want to be a safe shooter, which I mean, already at that point, I wanted to be too. So, but all that to say, that's something that's really important. So, really, in for new shooters, the most important thing that we should be looking at is safety. And just like how I mentioned earlier, the 4 universal firearm safety laws. Do you know what they are, Philip? I hope you know what they are.
I do. Before we get into it, though, I do want to emphasize the safety aspect of shooting and teaching people to be safe first,
Hmm.
then teaching them how to be accurate, right, or how to manipulate the firearm.
Yeah. Well, that's
Because
why I wanted to talk about the
right.
four
Yep.
laws of safety.
And I bring it up because and I want to emphasize this. There are like a lot of skill sets that you learn when you learn to drive a car, right? You're learning
Hmm.
the safety features of being on the road first. You're not learning the specifics of your vehicle that you're going to be driving first. You're learning like the safety features in the classroom or whatever it may be. Now, I'm not saying you should be in the classroom training people, but those safety things that you teach somebody first are things that they're going to be ingrained in their head, and especially if that's the first thing you focus on, and you
Hmm.
focus on it a lot. And we talk
Hmm.
about a lot, even beyond just like you're being at the range and shooting. There's a lot of habits, and that's the thing I want to bring up too and point out as habit building that we do as competitive shooters, like finger off the trigger when you're moving, putting the firearm if it has a safety, putting it on safe, when you're not firing, right?
Hmm.
Like it's basic stuff like that I think if you learn early and you practice earlier, it's going to be like a no-brainer in your head. It's going to be like, where's the brake pedal in a car, right? It's in the center. Where's the gas pedal? It's on the right, that kind of stuff. So anyway, back to the firearms safety rules. I'll give you one, and I'll have you give me another one.
All right, let's go.
So treat every firearm as it is loaded.
Hmm.
That's the first one I will give you.
I agree. And I like to, and in addition to that, it's knowing the condition of it. But like you said, it's
Yes,
treated
sir.
as
Yep.
if it is loaded as well.
Yep.
So, and number 2 is never point your weapon or your muzzle at anything you don't intend to shoot.
Yep. And then number 3 is knowing what your target is and knowing what's beyond your target.
Yep.
The
And the
idea
four,
behind that, I would say the idea behind that being that if you're going to shoot something, like just don't go shooting willy nilly in the woods.
hmm
Anyway,
and,
number 4.
and Phil, I mean, before I go into the last law, we actually did have a situation before where we knew our target, but we didn't know what was beyond it, and we actually got in trouble. Do you remember that time? We wouldn't say we got in trouble, but we could have gotten in trouble. Do you remember do you know what I'm talking about?
Was it when we were in Muskegon?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. That was it. That was interesting.
Hmm.
Anyway, what's number 4, Tyler?
Clearly, you don't want to go into the specifics of that one, but all right. So, and
I
the
have
last,
I have my feelings on that, and I get very passionate when I talk about it. So
that's fair. And also, the last one was keep your finger off your trigger until you're ready to fire.
yeah, that's a good one.
It
And
is.
that one, like I said earlier, it applies at no matter what you're doing. If you're shooting like at a flat range at a target, if you're shooting in a competition, because unless your gun has a major malfunction, which there are some that do, your gun will not go off unless there's something to actuate the trigger, right?
Hmm.
Now, short of like muzzling or not muzzling, of like reholstering into your holster wrong, getting caught on something, like what's the one thing that's going to actuate that trigger is your finger, right?
Hmm.
Like 99.9 repeating percent of the time that's the case. So
Exactly. It's your finger or it's your cover or it's your garment or something. And we've had that before too, where we've trained with people and we're like, hey, stop. They're like, what's going on? We're like, your shirt is getting caught on your trigger guard and that might pull your trigger. So, and that's
yeah,
ironically enough, that's another reason why I like to carry appendix because I can actually see where my gun is going, where my trigger is, where my covers at all, my cover garment is all times. Versus if I'm carrying at like that three, I guess that 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock, I'm guessing in a
really.
sense. Hmm.
That, and maybe it's just because I'm taller and I can see where I'm reholstering. I really don't have an issue with that personally. I have seen where
Hmm.
people have definitely shoved their pistol in and caught their garments, and then you're like, whoa, 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 hold up, and let's back that back out
Hmm.
and remove your garment. And
Exactly.
a lot of that too is just like making sure that if you are reholstering, that your inner shirt's tucked in,
Hmm.
especially if you're doing concealed carry.
Oh, I agree. There should, when it comes to concealed carry, you should, in my opinion, there should only be one cover garment in between basically your gun and your cover garment. So
If
let's
you have a
say you
jacket
have,
on,
then you tuck the inside into.
okay, hmm. Interesting.
That's the way I see it. Well, I guess with the jacket, then I guess with the shirt, that's fine. But I'm saying if it's like zipped up, then maybe, I guess, I don't, that's why if you watch me, I rarely have a jacket on. And when I do have a jacket on, it's always zipped down. Fun fact.
Sure. Hmm.
So this way there is really only one cover garment in between me at all times. I don't like zipping up my jacket. Now you know. So, and also the beauty of the four universal firearm safety laws is when it comes to NDs or negligent discharges or when people get hurt, it's always because you are breaking more than one rule. It's usually two or three at a time, if not more. That's when NDs happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's you try to create these different layers of like accidents from or keeping accidents from happening, right? Like
Hmm.
it's these each of these is an insurance thing, right? So you have to break a lot of them before you're going to have an ND, right?
Hmm.
And then in the case of like if you do have an ND, which happens in competition from time to time, that's why we have other rules. Like I guess you could follow the rule of like knowing your target what's beyond it, right? Like even if you do ND like into a berm, at least you know that the berm is there, right? Like it's around you, and
Exactly.
that's why you don't break things like the 180, right? So knowing
Hmm.
your targets are within that space. So
Exactly.
yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. That you have to break a lot of rules in order to accidentally hurt somebody.
Hmm. Exactly. And now, so I guess now that we've talked about the four universal firearm safety laws, let's say now you're a new shooter, you have bought a gun. Now what?
Well, the first thing that you should do is you should figure out how it works.
That's a really good idea. Hmm.
And along with that is like and we talk about dry fire from time to time, right?
Hmm.
And that's one way you can kind of figure it out. So whenever I buy a new pistol or a rifle, if I'm not familiar with the action of said firearm, the first thing I'm going to do is figure that out, right? And I make sure that if I am doing any kind of dry fire ever, that there's no ammo anywhere near where I'm at, right?
Hmm.
Because I will dry fire with magazines, empty magazines, But one of the things that you can do as a new shooter is figure out how to dry fire your pistol, and by doing so, you can also figure out how it functions in a safe manner. I even recommend that brand new shooters that are doing this, obviously all your ammo is wherever, but if you want to feel even more safe, go in your basement against a cement wall that's into the dirt, right, and then practice with it,
I agree.
because people who are really new, they're going to be hopefully very cautious. And if you just want, again, knowing your target was beyond it, like if you're going to
Hmm.
shoot into the wall in your basement, yeah, it sucks. but at least there's a cement wall and then some dirt behind that, right?
Hmm. I 100% agree. That is how I dry fire to this day. I only dry fire in my basement. Fun
Interesting.
fact. Hmm.
Yeah. Hmm. I
That's
don't
what
know. I don't always.
That's how I choose to do it. That's
Yeah.
where my space is because once again, it's another layer of safety. Going right back to like you said, rule number 4. If Murphy's law, right? How because of that, if something does actually go wrong, I'll be shooting in my basement, and at least my neighbors are
Hmm.
safe,
Right.
and I don't have to deal with a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'll have to deal with a contractor, but I won't have to deal with a lawyer.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Is again, we re-emphasizing. I feel like I'm beating it at a horse with this, making sure there's no ammo around you. But when you do get set up for concealed carry, um, making sure that you remove the magazine, rack the slide if you have one that's in the pipe after the magazine's been removed, and then check the state of the firearm to make sure that there is nothing in the chamber once the magazine has been removed. If you have ammo in that magazine still and you want to leave it in that magazine because it's defensive, put your loose round back in, take that magazine completely out of the room. And if you have a safe, put it in your safe, and then grab your empty magazines and take those with you. Same
Hmm.
thing goes with if you have a spare magazine. Also, make sure that you put that away from you as well if it has ammo in it. And then I always recheck my magazines, and then I recheck the firearm before I even think about dry firing again. Just because that way I know, and I'll even set it out. Like Tyler, I don't know if you do this or not, but I'll set everything out that I'm going to dry fire with, and I'll look at it, I'll inspect it, the magazines, like both. Usually it's 2 or 3 magazines that I'm dry firing with, and then the firearm itself without a magazine in it with a slide lock back, and I will inspect that before I even begin starting again. That's
Hmm.
that's that's how thorough I am with checking that stuff.
For sure. I feel like I'm constantly press checking, even though at this point, even if I'm in the middle of dry firing, I've done like 100 reps, I'll still be press checking. I don't know
Yeah.
why, but at this point, it's become a habit. But once again, going right back to safety. So, kind of like what you're talking about with dry firing, knowing your gun and understanding things like being able to rack your slide, prepping your trigger, knowing where that wall is, getting used to
Yeah.
that trigger, field stripping it, cleaning it. So I know we're kind of like I'm kind of blasting through like some of these things in our opinion are basic things when it comes to your firearm because there is a lot that goes into these tips for new shooters. So so let's say at this point you've dry fired, you have function checked your gun, you've field
Yep.
stripped it, you've cleaned it, you've learned your trigger enough. Let's say you've put maybe 100 reps with your dry fire at least. As like, okay, I've done all of this. I have now let's say I already have my holster. We can talk more about holsters later, but let's say I
Yep.
have my holster, I have my ammo, I have my targets, and I'm ready to go to the range. Now what?
So, are you, so from the aspect of being a new shooter, I would always recommend trying to find somebody that that you can trust that's safe, right? That
Hmm.
maybe has been shooting for quite a while. I know maybe this was not what you're thinking, Tyler, but I would almost go with somebody else,
Say
right?
that one more time.
I would go with someone else,
I agree. I wouldn't go by
like another
myself. My
like
Mhm.
another shooter
Yeah.
that is more experienced, right?
Hmm. I agree.
Um, because they're going to be able to show you stuff and teach you some like range etiquette that we can cover for you today in the podcast, but they're going to show you some more nuanced items that you may not be thinking about,
Hmm.
right? Most people, your first experience going to the range, unless you're going with someone else, because I always encourage people to go outdoor shooting first if you can,
Hmm.
for many reasons, which I'll get into in a second here. But again, typically, if you're going outdoors, you're a member of a club. And if you're a new shooter, you're probably not going to be a member of a club yet. Unless maybe you're like a shotgun shooter that's getting into pistols. Maybe you're a member of that shotgun club already, but
Hmm.
they have pistol bays that you could use. But most people are typically going to go to an indoor range.
Yeah. That's how I
Would
started.
you would you agree with that, Tyler?
I By the time I met you, Phil, I pretty much exclusively only went to an indoor club, and
Oh,
I did yeah. So when we were shooting together, that was probably only like my second or third time ever actually drawing from my holster and firing live rounds.
hmm.
like from my holster, because once again I was part of an indoor range and I wasn't allowed to. But at
Yeah.
that point I was dry firing like crazy because I knew I wasn't allowed to. So I was doing as many drills as I could at indoor ranges, and I was only doing about 50 rounds at a time, maybe 100 at times, because this was also 2020 when I was paying probably 50, 60 cents a round for 9 mil. So I was paying a lot of
Yeah.
money for
That's a
9 mil
lot.
at the time. Yeah. And that's why I was like, I can only do 50 rounds at a time. I remember Lena Mitchellek, she put a 50 round count drill that you can do at an indoor range essentially, because she knew that, because at the time this was when a lot of new shooters were coming. Most new shooters could not draw from your holster because you're at an indoor range. So it was really cool that she did that, and I kind of did that for a while. I did other drills or just doing what I could, just trying to be as accurate as I can and as quote unquote fast as I can without getting yelled at, because once again you're not allowed to rapid fire either at indoor
Right.
ranges. So, but I do agree with you. Like I I'm glad. I'm very glad. I look back and I'm thankful of how I started, but it definitely would have been nice to go with somebody else, because a lot of my shooting was, yeah, I had I got my CPL, and my buddy, he was an NRA instructor, and but also he was a retired Marine and retired Army. He was an infantryman, so he had a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge to teach. And I took a CPL class with him with very minimal knowledge, and I passed and got my CPL because I'm not even going to explain my thoughts on that. And so I was able to get that, and I learned a lot from online of learning, doing handgun tutorials from Jerry Miculek, John Lovell, Honest Outlaw, and all of these different guys, JJ Rakaza, and watching these videos like, okay, this is how you grip, this is what you do, this is how you prep your trigger. And I learned a lot of that. So now I'm learning the theory, I'm learning all of that, and trying to do that on my own at an indoor range. But it definitely would have been nice to go with somebody else, because I'm sure that person could probably help me fine tune some little details and probably help me not make sure I don't develop bad habits because I'm
Yes.
shooting on my own, versus now this person saying, "Hey, don't do that," because you and I know this. I'm not an instructor. I would love to be an instructor one day, but I've helped shooters where, whether I've helped someone they've never shot a gun before and helped them shoot a gun, and I've helped someone who's maybe quote unquote been shooting for years, but they're not the best at guns. And of course they'll both ask for my advice, and it is much easier for me to help someone who's never shot a gun before, because now I can drill in solid fundamentals versus someone who's been shooting for years and now we're trying to break bad habits.
Yeah, I actually like that you bring up the habits thing, because when I was thinking about going to an indoor range and why I don't necessarily like for new shooters to go to an indoor range first unless they're getting instruction at an indoor range, is because you do see a lot of people at indoor ranges that have bad habits.
Oh yeah.
And they do things that, like, they'll unintentionally typically, but they will flag people.
Hmm.
I could never be an RO at an indoor range. It would stress me out way too much. They'll flag
Dude, I
people.
know.
They'll have their hold their gun with the finger in the trigger guard. Basic things that you shouldn't do, and for some reason people just don't think of.
I know.
And then you see that and you think that that's okay and that that's acceptable,
Hmm.
and it's not. Like, to be people that are truly safe shooters, you want to like watch like those videos from those people that you were talking about, from like a John Lovell who's going to teach you the proper way to do things, or somebody that you can trust, that an instructor or somebody that has been shooting for quite a while, that has got a good solid head on their shoulders. um Again, it's just one of those things where I just in a, I don't I'm not a huge fan of shooting indoors unless you have
No,
to.
I
And
agree.
it's also extremely loud, which it can be
It
very
is.
intimidating for some shooters who are not used to the sound of gunfire, especially younger kids for sure, because it's loud. It is legitimately very loud and can be very jarring, especially when
Hmm.
somebody pulls out like a Magnum revolver or something like that.
Yeah. Or even an AR.
Yep. Now that
It's
being
loud.
said, I did my CPL training. I did at an indoor range, and but I was also under the tutelage of an instructor doing it though, right? and picked up actually a lot of good habits as a result. So I'm not saying the indoor ranges are bad. I'm just saying if you're going to go, maybe take a class, right?
Hmm. I agree. And also going to an indoor range, I'd say definitely there are only a few reasons why I will go to an indoor range. One, of course, like you said, because I'm taking a class there by actual instructors and trying to get that CPL or taking like a basics of handgun or rifle course, etc. Two, you're renting a gun. You're trying out a
That's fair. Yep.
multiplicity of guns
Yep.
because a lot of these places it's like $10, 10, $15 to try out a bunch. I think it's like 10 or $15 per gun, but you'll get like 10, 15, 20 rounds each. So at least now you're able to get your hands on these different guns. And that's why I'm about to go on a rant right now. Which is why we're because there is the myth of people say this gun feels good in my hand or this gun does not fit my hand. I do not believe in that.
Mm, I
You and
disagree.
I know you and I differ in this
I do.
because you have bigger hands than me.
Yes.
But I'm talking about in the context of a new shooter because new shooters typically don't know how to grip a gun correctly.
I would agree
So
with that.
So a new shooter might say, "This does not feel good in my hands," when in reality, it's because they're not gripping it correctly.
That's fair. There is something to be said about a grip angle, though. Like a Glock feels way different than
One hundred
like a
percent.
1911,
One hundred
right?
percent.
But then I think you're more looking at, in that case, you're more looking at how sight alignment works for a
Yes.
person, because usually that
Yes.
grip angle will change sight alignment more than anything else.
Yes. Which is also why, as you know, I have a Shadow Systems, and what's really cool about Shadow Systems, hey Shadow Systems, you should sponsor us. And how with Shadow Systems, what's really cool with them is they have what's called their point of aim, their POA, I forgot what they call it, but essentially you're able to change the grip module is not necessarily like a Smith and Wesson with an M&P, how you're able to put like a small, medium, large grip module. Instead, you're able to change your point of aim because you're changing the back strap where it can mimic either a Glock angle, an M&P angle, or a 1911 angle. And for me, because I started with M&Ps, I actually put that middle one, which is the M&P angle. So I essentially have a Glock, but I'm able to aim it like an M&P. So that's why when I shoot a Glock, I'm like, why is it not lined up? I'm like, oh, right, duh. Because I have to remember that. It's like, oh, it's slightly different. So so now, kind of like what I'm saying. So with an indoor range, I would say, like you said, going with an instructor, renting guns, and I will admit, when if I'm like super lazy, it's cold, and because there is an indoor range 5 minutes from my house versus my outdoor range club, which is like 40 minutes away. If I just need to go for like 10 minutes to zero my gun,
Sure.
I'm like, I don't want to pack all my stuff and haul things just for a one way trip of 40 minutes, just for something I can get done in 10 minutes at an indoor range. I will admit that because I'm just going to be in and out, but that I have to be because I have nothing else to do. I'm going by myself, then I might do that. But that is so rare, once in a blue moon. I do remember the last time I went to an indoor range, I was with a buddy of mine who had a membership at this indoor range, and he wanted my help to help him zero his 300 blackout AR pistol. And I remember like we zeroed it. He starts shooting. I kind of just go to the back, and the RO, he's like in a plate carrier, and him and I are just next to each other. We're basically kind of just watching everyone because I'm like, I don't want to be up here. I'm going to be back here watching this way. I don't get flags either.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
and that's the other thing too, is if you don't have an opportunity to go with somebody who you can trust to teach you how to, and that's a mixed bag too, but how to like shoot a gun at an outdoor range where it's more of a private experience. If you don't know what to do, and I can guarantee you that if you go to a indoor range and you get all your stuff, they're going to give you a walkthrough anyway what to do. But if you ever have any questions, always ask the range officer that's there.
yep.
And some small minor things that may seem obvious to a lot of people who've been shooting for a while. But if like when you go in there, a lot of times they'll give you the firearm if you're renting one, which most people typically are. or like if you have your gun in a bag, which they typically require you to walk in with, don't touch anything. If you don't know what to do, bring in your little tote with you. You can be holding your tote or your bag, and then just
Mm-hmm.
ask the range officer and be like, "Hey, I've got a firearm here, like in a tote, you can see it, obviously, or in your bag. Like, what do I do next? I want
Mm-hmm.
to be safe. Like, tell them that. And as soon as you do, I guarantee you that range officer will tell you if they're worth their salt. They'll tell you exactly what you should do, and they'll
Yeah,
walk you through
exactly.
everything because it's more safe for them. It's more safe for them, right?
Exactly.
And they're going to appreciate it that you asked, right? So don't ever feel
Mm-hmm.
bad asking a range officer something. But the big no to do is like, let's say you're at the line, you got your gun out, finally, you pulled it out safely, you've got ammo in the firearm, or even if it's empty and you're sitting on the firing line, your gun is the barrel of the gun is facing, downrange, towards your targets, and it's just sitting there. And if you have a question, don't pick up your gun and take it to the RO.
Yeah,
Like
I know, right?
because then you're gonna be flagging everybody. And some people don't think
I
about that
know.
because,
Yep.
like, if you have a question on something else, like let's say I'm at a pottery class, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
have, or like a painting class, I'm gonna have a question. I'm gonna pick it up and I'm gonna bring the thing over to the instructor and say, "What am I doing here? What am I doing wrong?" Right? If
Mm-hmm.
it's painting or whatever, maybe I'm going to. I don't know. But you don't want to do that with a firearm. Leave the firearm there. Make sure the muzzle is pointed downrange, which again means towards the targets. And then leave it and then go ask the range officer if you need help, or if you don't want to leave and you want to stand there again, put the gun down, and then turn towards range officer or wave at them or whatever, and then just say, "Hey, can I have your assistance?"
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be more than willing to do that because again, they want to get home safe to their families as well.
Exactly. I 100% agree. I love how you specified if they're worth their salt because it's true. Unfortunately, there are some bad
Yeah,
eggs. I wouldn't say there. It's a majority. It's a very tiny percentage, but it is there. And I want to very quickly hit on what you mentioned earlier too. Of course, go with a friend, and I would encourage go with multiple friends or different friends at a
that's
time
fair.
because once again, I love how what Ronin Tactics talks about, and I believe Scott Jelinski talks about this too, and John Lovell and a lot basically every instructor I've listened to online will say this: how when it comes to shooting, when it comes to firearms, it's 90%, 90 to 90% fundamentals, and then it's that 5 to 10% of preference. You're getting that 90% of fundamentals that is 100% across board, that this is what you should do, this is what you need to do, and then it's that last 5 to 10% where you're figuring out like, okay, how do I want to do this? Like for example, Phil and I, we both utilize the thumbs forward grip, but we do it still slightly different because we have
Mm-hmm.
different size hands, we have different flexibility, mobility, so even our stances are very different from each other. Phil has more of a very angled. You have a very angled, like you're standing up straight, like very like kind of like you're about to go for a squat. Whereas I have more of like a staggered stance. And but once again, that also comes from our preferences and from our trainings. But that's part of that 5% is figuring out what actually works for us. Because I know there are times we joke with each other, it's like, all right, I'm going to do the Tyler stance or I'm going to do the Phil stance. And then we're like, I don't like this.
No, I try every once in a while, and I know that, like in theory, the way that you stand is faster. Like
Mm-hmm.
you get more stability out of the way. Well, that's not necessarily true, but maybe out of the way that I stand. But definitely more mobility out of the way that you stand. So it's not neither are necessarily wrong,
No.
but and I wonder if a lot of that comes from like when I was shooting like CMP because there's a lot of like stand and shoot kind of stuff. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Um,
But
anyway, all that to say, the other thing came to mind, Tyler, is
mm-hmm.
it's hard to vet friends that are into firearms if they're worth their salt or not, right? Because just
And
because they
that's,
shoot
yeah.
firearms,
Yep.
there's no guarantee that they're going to know what they're doing, and they may teach you bad habits as well.
Just like
Now,
the guy who flagged me.
yes, and there are again, this is not like 100% true. I would say 99% of the people that shoot USPSA, IDPA, three gun, those people, if they're shooting competitively, they're already having to pay attention to all those rules all at the same time, doing a very stressful thing. So
Yeah.
chances are, if they're doing that and you've heard about them doing that, I would probably seek them out to be the ones that you'd want to shoot with
Mm-hmm.
because they have to abide by those rules. Because if they
Mm-hmm.
don't, they will get DQ'd out of a match.
Yeah. which is I know I'm trying to remember. I believe this was actually something that you, me, and Kyle we had a conversation off script. How Kyle argues that essentially, if the person's a C class shooter or better, that's when it's like, yeah, we can chat with them, let's listen to them, let's train with them in the sense because now they have that track record of I know I've done the competition, I've done it enough times to where I'm not DQing, I know the rules, and I have good enough fundamentals. You know what I mean?
I agree.
And also, too, I love John Lovell talks about this too. How we are better shooters today because of competition shooters. They're the best
Yeah,
shooters out there.
yeah. Maybe somebody will have a podcast on that, but yeah, from a sheer shooting perspective, your competition shooters are probably going to be some of your best shooters out there. Whether that again USPSA, IDPA, three gun,
Exactly.
PRS, even some of the military stuff with CMP. That's a little bit
Hmm.
easier. I mean, not
Yeah.
easier, but that's a lot of precision shooting.
Yes. And
Those people are going to be the
also,
best in their area, and they also use a lot of like they'll. There's a lot of stuff that's come from competition that has made its way down to the general market. Red
hmm
dots is one of those. Magwells is
yes.
another one of those.
Hmm.
Slide serrations is another one
hmm
that wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for competition shooters.
Yes. And also, too, I don't want people who are listening to also think this as well. I want to really stress the fact that I said competition shooters are the best shooters. They might not necessarily be the best fighters.
Correct. Or not
I
have great tactics.
Exactly, and that's what I mean by that.
Yep.
That's what I mean by that. They're not like shooting is just one discipline in terms of fighting, but fighting also includes, like you said, tactics. It's understanding navigation. It's knowing the medical side of things. It's the force enforcing, the hands-on martial arts, etc. So there's a big pool umbrella of things that you need to be a fighter. Whereas USPSA, that's more like I am fast and accurate. I am a phenomenal shooter. I just might not be a good fighter. I might actually be a detriment. So if I were to be put into a tactical unit ready to go into war, it's like you may be a great shooter, but you also might die because I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, for example, I love John Wick. John Wick is probably one of my favorite movie franchises. Movie, whatever, because it's not trilogy, it's a quad, whatever.
Sure.
But there are many times I'm like, John's like just standing in the middle of the thing. I'm like, you should be dead right there.
Yeah, you definitely tell that he was trained by Terran Tactical
Oh,
because they
100%.
do a lot of the USPSA style shooting.
Which, don't get me
And I mean,
wrong, he is a phenomenal shooter. He is a
yeah,
better. They are both better shooters than I am. Don't get me wrong.
yes. So you get a lot of that. Plus, it looks cool, and then they have
Yes,
their bulletproof suits that don't really
it is
exist.
true because that's the thing. USPSA, like that style of shooting, it looks much better for movies. Tactical shooting is boring. I know, like for me, I grew up playing Call of Duty. We, of course, joke about, we'll make fun of campers, but in reality, that is what you do in real life.
Yeah.
You camp. That is how you live. So, but I digress from that.
Yeah. So, okay, Tyler. So now that we've kind of talked about safety, we've gone over, the dry fire and getting used to your firearm, and then basic range etiquette.
Hmm.
Where do you go from there as a new shooter to become more proficient with your firearm?
You practice. At this point, you're at the range and you practice, and kind of like what I mentioned, you figure out, you get the fundamentals done. Fundamentals, fundamentals, fundamentals. That's something that even to this day I stress heavily on, and that is really important to me. And I remember my first USPSA, like I've never done anything like that before. And something that you mentioned and other guys mentioned, like, oh my goodness, like this is his first time. Because once, and not, it was more because I just focused so much on the fundamentals, such as
Yeah.
just learning the firearm safety laws, learning how to shoot while moving, learning how to manipulate my gun. And keep in mind, too, this was actually not even my gun. I borrowed your PCC for it because at the time, all
That's
I
fair.
had was an M&P Shield Plus that was jamming pretty much every 5 rounds. Comes to find out there was an issue with the firing pin. And finally, after 1,000 rounds with that thing, 1,000 rounds, Phil. I think I had 200
Oh, I know.
failure to feeds. It was terrible. I finally got frustrated enough to send it back and come to find out there's an issue with the firing pin. Once they fix it, the gun works just fine now. Unfortunately, at that point, I already switched over to Shadow System, so I didn't really care. And it wasn't milled for an optic either, so now I really don't care for that gun.
Right.
Great gun, but I'll fanny pack carry it, or but that's really about it. But all that to say, work on your fundamentals and figure out that last 5 to 10% of your preferences, and then just run drills. Go with friends, run drills. Get the T-Rex Arms app, get the Range Day app, and do those drills. They're good drills, whether it's for your pistol, your rifle, your shotgun, if that's what floats your boat, because that doesn't for me, because I love shotguns so much. So
You got to get a mag fed shotgun. It's, hey
yeah,
man,
whatever.
it's the future.
Yeah, whatever.
The future is
The futurist. The futurist is here.
the future is 1990, whenever the Sega came out, like
Yeah.
maybe early 2000s.
I don't even know.
The other thing too is like you can Google like basic drills too, because the
Mhm.
Range app is great. I would say there's some of that stuff's maybe a little bit more advanced. Not too bad actually. I think we talked a little bit about this where it's not awful, but if you're a newer shooter, you know you're gonna not be probably doing any movement for a while. You're gonna be more of stand and deliver kind of stuff, trying to get your accuracy, trying to get your draws, that kind of stuff. Those things, and you can find drills out there for that. And honestly, like there's a lot of people that's when they dry fire, they don't get
Mhm.
overly complex. They'll work on just small parts, like drawing the gun from the holster and not even bringing it up to your eye line, but just drawing, like and bringing it halfway, drawing halfway, and then they'll
Mhm.
go like halfway out to eye line, halfway out, punch out to dry eye
Yeah,
line.
that's a good point.
Yep. So again, you can practice all those things, and even if your most experienced shooters are going to keep doing that, those basic fundamentals like Tyler's talking about. But yeah, go online, find some basic drills for new shooters. I'm sure there's
Mhm.
plenty of them out there.
Watch
Uh,
videos. That's what I
yep,
did.
watch
If
videos
mhm.
again from the people that Tyler mentioned earlier. The Warrior Poet Society has a whole series of like
Mhm.
handgun 1, 2, 3, and they go up to 4. Tyler.
Just three. It's handgun
Yep.
1, 2, and 3. Handgun one is essentially going over the safety, universal firearm safety laws, and essentially the basics of your pistol. This is your trigger. This is how you use your gun, and that's basically it's the fundamentals of the pistol. Pistol two, I think, is more about reloading, using cover and concealment, moving cover to cover, and then pistol three is going to be more like target transition. I'm sorry, pistol two is more target transitions. Pistol three is shooting on the move. Pistol disarms and force on force training. That's pistol 1, 2, and 3, and then they have rifle 1, 2, and 3 as well on there. And if you want to do competition stuff, they have I know this is starting to sound like an ad for them, but for everyone who knows me knows I'm a massive fan of Warrior Post Society.
It
I've met
it is
John, so
it
he's an
is
awesome
a
guy.
single location where all of that stuff exists, and the content that you're going to get is going to be quality,
Hmm.
right? Like you don't have it's going to cost you. I think it's like $10 a month or $100 a
Yep.
year or whatever it is.
Yep.
It's going to cost you that, but then you're also going to save your time and have like what you're going to get is going to be good stuff,
I
right?
agree.
So, Warrior Poet Society, please sponsor Tyler.
For the
Uh,
love of everything, please sponsors. I just bought your sling, John. Come on, bro.
yeah, we joke. For those who hadn't listened before, this is one of our inside jokes. We always talk about people sponsoring us. Anyway, so
I'm
the
serious about this one though.
the other thing that we haven't really talked about a lot is a lot of the context has been from pistol ownership. I think a lot of people that tends to be where they start from, right? Because
Agreed.
a pistol is definitely viewed as being a defensive firearm. People want to get their CPL, whether or not like people will get into pistols for or to firearms for various reasons. A lot of people, including women, will get into firearms because they don't necessarily feel safe where they're living, whether they're single, even if they're married. They moved into a new area, or there's been some kind of threat, or they've gone
Yeah.
through some problem.
Hmm.
Whatever it is, you name it, right? So a lot
Well,
of people will look at pistols as being a defensive tool, which
yeah.
in theory, unless you're shooting for competition, your firearms are truly only defensive tools, right? You never want to
Yeah.
use one in an offensive capacity, unless you're military, I suppose.
Mhm.
But
What's crazy is you speak of how people really get sparked to do that. I mean, that's what happened with me. I started because of the riots. I was
right,
just talking with a buddy recently, how he came up to me. He's like, "Hey, Tyler, I want to get my CPL. What are my steps?" I said, "Yeah." I told him, I gave him a couple recommendations. I actually gave a recommendation of Brett and Daryl because they are CPL instructors, and we actually will be having an episode with them.
Yep.
Speaking of that, we're going to be interviewing them and talk. I'm super excited about that episode too. But he told me, and I asked him like why, because I know for him he does BJJ, he does Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. He's a fighter, and then he told me that he had a friend, a girl who almost got abducted a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
and this happens right here
It
in
does.
Atlanta. It happened. His friend almost got kidnapped and got abducted, and who knows what could have happened to her. And for him, he's like, "Oh my goodness!" Of course, he wasn't there, but he was just thinking, "Oh my goodness, what if this could have happened to me, or what if I was with someone and they were getting abducted? Like, what could I do?" Because of course, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is good, yes, one on one, but if there's a crowd of people, good luck. It's like, all right, let's all grapple, everyone. You know what I mean? So,
Right. Yeah. And again, I think that's why it's so important to have this conversation around, the proper training, because a lot of individuals, especially women, I think, because they tend to be, guys tend to be very, in general, be very gung ho about stuff. Pun intended.
yeah,
I think I should think is gung ho. Anyway, but they tend to be
it
very like,
is.
oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get a gun because I'm a dude, right? Like, and
Yep.
women are more reserved. They're like, I need this as a tool to defend myself. um Most people, if they're smart, they're not like afraid of it, but like there's some fear associated with firearms, right?
Yeah.
Because they are a deadly weapon, and can be a healthy fear. But then they have to get past that point to say, I want to carry a firearm. How can I get there? And unfortunately, in this arena, there's a lot of guys that have a lot of like macho, like, oh, I'm gonna give you a 44 Magnum for your first gun and watch you like hurt yourself shooting it.
I know. It
Like there,
drives me nuts when
yes,
I
and
see
there's
those
a
videos of like there's this one video of this girl with her boyfriend. She's shooting this 12 gauge slug, and he's like laughing in the back until he's one recording, and I'm like, dude,
yeah, she's
you
never
have
gonna shoot again.
she's never going to shoot again. You have created a massive flinch for her now, and I'm like, this you could tell that was her first time ever shooting, and she's probably like, I hate you, and I don't blame her.
Yep. So all I have to say, there are a lot of resources out there. I know we've talked about Warrior Poet Society a lot. For people who they don't know where to turn, they don't necessarily want to go to a guy that may try to, have that macho attitude with them, like, oh, I really need to do whatever, blah blah blah. Even
Hmm.
some instructors are like that. Now, I will say the
Oh yeah,
firearms community has gotten a lot better in this, but
100.
there are
Yep. Hmm.
still some of that out there, and unfortunately, but there are those resources, online resources out there that if you do want to learn on your own, you can.
Hmm.
So
I
this is
agree.
all kind of a lot of pistol talk we've talked about. I'm going to kind of pivot here,
Yeah.
but I'm also a strong believer that if you are going to purchase a firearm and you're looking at it from a home defense perspective, that a rifle and even a shotgun are good alternatives as well. It's just going to be a little bit different path to get there, but a lot of, like Tyler said earlier, a lot of these things still apply. All the safety rules still apply.
Yep.
For a rifle, and we'll get into things to look at to purchase the first time, so I won't go into that now. But most people are going to get an AR-15 to start, right?
Oh, 100%.
So making sure that you're buying, you're getting experience on the AR-15. Same thing, dry fire still applies. You can dry fire a rifle. They are typically easier for most people to shoot, but making sure that you properly zero, and this applies to pistols too, but make sure if you have a dot, make sure you properly zero the dot on the rifle. Don't just assume that from the factory that you're going to pull it out, put it on the rifle, and it's going to work. I think there's a lot of every once in a while I hear that from people like, oh, put it on there and it'll be zeroed because it's designed for this rifle. And yes, it may be close, but you want to make sure that you zero it as well. And again, seek somebody that you know that has zeroed before. You can go to a hunter, even they'll help you out with it.
Hmm.
Look up zero theory online if you really want to. There are many different theories, and not necessarily any of them are not none of them are really wrong, necessarily.
50.
But
But
right,
I'm
we
kidding.
choose we choose 0 to 50, but you can do
I'm
56, you can do 100,
okay,
you
okay,
can do
Marine.
200 if you
Whatever.
want.
A 200-yard zero is a 50-yard zero.
I know most of the
In
time,
theory.
not for
In
my rifle,
theory.
it's not.
In theory. Once.
Depends on your barreling.
No, I know,
So
but but and keep in mind too. It's funny because speaking of zero theory, I remember recently I was chatting with other people about this, and these are guys who've been shooting for a long time. And then I kind of pulled up zero theory, and they're like, what? And I showed him like the graphic because basically I had different examples of like, all right, so this is where you're, let's say you had a 50-yard zero. If you, this is your point of aim, this is where your point of impact will be. And it kind of showed like, this is 50. And then it kind of showed like, this is where 100 will be, this is where 200, this is 3, 50, etc. And they're like, oh, because once again, like this is just even more stuff is out there, which should be more of a basic, but I know is like, people don't think about that. It's like, oh, sometimes people are like, oh, I zero at this because it's my buddy told me to do, or I'm just doing, or once again going back to context, like let's say you have a home defense rifle, you probably want to zero it at 10 yards, or maybe
Yeah.
even 5 or less because that's what stats will tell us. And then there's guys like me who still zero it at 50 either way.
Right. I mean,
But
you at that point you're at that close, you're height over bore, like
exactly,
realistically. So but again, same thing applies. Practice with it. You know, if you get a rifle, you know, putting in the magazine, learning how it seats. Um, a rifle does, and a pistol too, does seat differently with a magazine that has ammo in it versus not. They do
yeah.
make something that's called dummy rounds. You
Hmm.
can buy these for pistol, rifle, and shotgun, and they're very clearly dummy rounds because they're typically
They're
they're
like
colored in
red or
such a way they don't.
blue.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. They don't look like an actual round.
They look like
So
a toy. Like it's
yeah,
supposed to go in like a
yes.
toy gun, essentially.
Yep. And practice with those, practice seating the magazine in with dummy rounds as well. And then make sure you practice the manual of arms. Like with dummy rounds are nice too because you can't fully function a firearm with it because there's no way for the bolt on a AR-15 to unlock because there's no shot, there's no pressure from that gas pushing the bolt back. So you can learn how to like properly charge it. Again,
Hmm.
and how to rack the right, just basic stuff, right? Be
Exactly.
familiar with your firearm before you go to the range.
Yep.
Stuff we talked about before. Shotguns are a little bit weird because you are having to deal with, if it's a pump action, you're having to deal with the pump. So you have to be able to, like, if you're going to use it defensively, how are you going to do so under duress? Because if you get one shot off, you're going to pump the next shot in, and you have to make sure that your level of dexterity under stress is to the point where you feel like you could confidently use one in a stressful situation.
Yeah. I remember a video I saw from Lucky Gunner years ago how he was basically explaining using a pump action shotgun as your home defense rifle, home defense gun, and how because if you're not practicing with it, it's really easy to think it's a semi-automatic where it's like boom, it's like where's my second shot? Where it's like it should be like fire and you just automatically pump it. Like it should be just second nature where you fire, you just pump and ready to go, as if it's just one nice smooth motion. So now I've developed that habit now, even though I never shoot that thing where I just shoot and pump and go already. I'm like, oh yeah. So,
Yeah, and we did a whole other episode on home defense
yep, yeah, we
firearms.
did.
So feel free to listen to that. There's a lot more information there. If you are home defense is your primary goal, definitely listen to that. It'll give you what we think our opinions, and they may not be right for you, but it gives us our opinions. We try to be semi-objective with it.
Yep. And keep
But
in
again,
mind,
most
I've probably changed my mind since then too.
right, and most people are going to look at a pistol from both the ability to carry it with the CPL, but then you can
Hmm.
also double duty as a home defense firearm as well if you
Yeah.
only want to get one firearm.
Yep. Glock
Okay,
19.
Glock 19. I don't disagree with that. I think a lot that's kind of the default answer
It
because
really
there's so many
is.
accessories for it out there. There are obviously a lot of other choices too, but
If you were to only get one gun ever in your life and you plan on concealed carrying it, home defense, etc., and quote unquote duty carrying it, Glock
you said
19.
duty.
No, whatever. But like, or some, I would say some
Ye-
probably a Glock 19.
Yeah, get a MOS version though. I assume they make an
Yes. Yep.
MOS version of the Glock, right? Yeah,
They
I know
do.
they make an
Yep.
MOS
Hmm.
version of the 17. And we say MOS, it's like their optics mounting system
Yep. It's their
because
multi optic system.
you don't have to get an optic on it if you don't want to, but at least this way down the road, if you're like, oh, this is cool, I really want to put an optic on my pistol, you still can. Again,
Exactly.
whole episode on that. Go listen to it, check it out. I don't know what number it is, but it was probably 10 episodes ago or so.
Give or take. But find it. It's, I think, I'm pretty sure we named it Home Defense or something like that. So definitely
Yeah, I mean,
check
I
it out.
guess Tyler, what are things though for a new shooter that they may want to look into getting when they're looking at purchasing a firearm though?
What do you mean by that?
Like like things to consider, like how it fits them properly, like how easy it is to use based on the individual, like, for example.
So, yep.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
when it
Go.
comes
Yep.
to what's up?
Go ahead.
So when it comes to getting a gun, there are essential when it comes to a handgun at least, there are there are two primary things to consider. It is concealability and shootability. Because for most people, once again, their first gun is most likely going to be. I'm talking about this in a context of a concealed carry gun, at least. So, to be fair, your goal is to find a gun that meets in the middle of that because a bigger gun is going to be significantly easier to shoot, but it's going to be harder to conceal. It's not going to be as comfortable. And then you're going to have to go the other end of the smaller gun is going to be easier to carry, more comfortable, but it's going to be harder to shoot. So it's trying to find that happy median. I'm really thankful that I was actually able to get basically a Glock 19 or a Shadow Systems MR920. I'm able to kind of meet that in the middle. Literally, that for me, that's that Goldilocks. I know for you, Phil, you've tried the Glock 19 in your context, a PSA
Mhm.
dagger, but it was still just a little too big for you to where it just wasn't comfortable. So I know for you, you chose to go just a hair smaller, and you got the Palmetto State micro dagger instead, the compensated version. And now I know you're like, dude, this is the most comfortable gun I've ever been able to carry, other than like a Ruger LCP or LC9, whatever it is,
Right.
versus because pocket carry is going to be, let's be real, that is probably the most comfortable way to carry. It's but how shootable is it? How accessible is it to draw? You know. So I
Right.
know for you, like because of that, trying to figure that out. So now it's once again, like I kind of mentioned, either going to like an indoor range and renting different guns, or going with different friends and trying out their guns. Because I remember we actually had a bunch of us guys were shooting, and there was a lady who has shot before, who has had guns, but she was trying to figure out a new gun. And the three of us had three completely different guns. I had my Shadow Systems. Our buddy Harrison had a SIG P320. Another guy, Ryan, he had a Taurus G3C, and she got to hold all three and got to shoot all three. And she was like, I really like the SIG P320. And I'm like, hey, that's awesome. I'm like, MR920 is better, but whatever, you know? So it's trying to, but once again, going back to you want something that you are able to carry well, that's comfortable, but is also you're able to actually shoot well. So it's trying to find that happy medium, that balance between the two when it comes to picking an actual gun.
Yeah, when I first got into like concealed carry, I thought that we were in the golden age of concealed carry firearms because the Smith and Wesson M&P Shield had come out,
Yeah.
and it had a capacity with the extended magazine of 8+1 in the chamber.
Yep.
And I was like, man, that's a lot of capacity for a really thin firearm. Fast forward, 6 years or whatever it was, between maybe 10 years between that release and the release of what we call the micro compacts today that
Yep.
have capacity of like 15 to
It's insane.
like 17, and it's the same thickness as the
It's
shield
insane.
that I carried. It's just absolutely insane.
I think
So
that, oh man. Yeah, go for it.
yeah, I was just gonna say brands to look at because I don't want to dwell on this too much because we did cover an episode
Nah.
on this. But brands to look at: Glock, Smith and Wesson.
hmm
If you're a bougie, H&K. They're good too.
Yeah. they
Sig.
did they are coming out or just came out with their new micro size gun, which I know our but lefties will probably be really excited for
Yep.
because the one thing about H&K is they are a true ambi gun. They are truly ambi. It's not like where you have to
Right.
change out your magazine release because it has slide releases on both levers. But no, it is truly ambi because it has mag releases on both ends and slide releases on both ends as well. So I know the Europeans, like the HKs, I believe Walters are like this too, how it's truly ambi. So I can see why people like that. We'll go that route.
Yeah, absolutely. And 6 Hour, I just want to make sure I mention them as well too.
Oh yeah.
Ruger's got a few out there.
hmm
Even if you're budget conscious, I like them just because I think they offer a lot of the things I'm looking for a good price point. Is the Palmetto State Armory micro daggers. Like
I agree.
my dagger, I really not have had any issues with. My micro dagger, I'm probably 300 rounds to at this point, and I haven't had any issues with it either.
Nice.
And they're super easy to carry, quite affordable. There's a lot of support there from holster manufacturers, especially for the micro dagger. Excuse me. So those are all things to look at. But those are the minimum. I wouldn't like. I don't look and bother with a high point.
Yeah.
They're very much a meme gun.
Get the yeet cannon,
I
bro.
Yep, I had a class with somebody who had one, and it may have just been a maintenance issue, but they're boat anchors, but it did not cycle at
Oh,
all. There's a lot of foreign guns that I'm like, I don't know if I would necessarily would look into. Um, what's the company out of Brazil? I forget the.
Taurus.
Yes, thank you. The Taurus G36C is really popular, but everyone I know that has owned one has all kinds of issues with it. And again, I'm not disparaging Taurus, and maybe it's just a bad batch, but because I've had issues. I've had a 22 pistol from Smith and Wesson. I've had problems with. It was
Hmm.
just a bad extractor angle. It got
And
fixed. Good
as
to go.
and as I mentioned earlier, I had a Smith and
Yeah.
Wesson as well. Over 200 malfunctions in the first 1,000 rounds.
Yep. And again, that those are things that are unacceptable. That should be work from the factory, right?
Hmm.
A lot of gun manufacturers during COVID, especially, did a lot of really quick QC. That's on them.
Yep.
And some people swear they'll never buy Smith and Wesson again as a result. The stuff coming out of them, is a lot better now that they're
Oh
not
yeah.
messing around with that. However, it did take tires forever to get his firearm back, but you are going to
It
be able to go
yeah.
to a Smith and Wesson and say, "This is not working. Fix it." Because I have
Hmm.
actually had an optic shear off of M&P
That's
Chrome,
right.
and I sent the slide into them, and they took care of it. Like, it wasn't necessarily their fault. Now, I used their screws that I was told to use for that optic, and
Hmm.
they had a weird taper on them, which was stupid. But again, and they fixed it and sent it back, right? Like, those companies that are that big are going to do it for you, right? And then once you do get up and running, typically it is going to be very reliable. The materials that they use are higher quality than some of the more cheaper manufacturers. But again, you might get an import in from other countries that are great, like the Canics. Those have been fantastic. A lot of people run those, and they run just fine. So that's another option to look at as well too. Um, anyway, I want to make sure that we're being cognizant of our time here, Tyler. What else are you thinking from like a gear recommendations that you want to touch on?
Yeah, of course. And oh man, I guess I'll kind of spitfire through it because I'm looking at the time, we're already about an
Yep.
hour right now. But of course, I'm going to go back to, it's not even concealed, just gear in general. Find a good holster. I'm a big fan of Kydex holsters because it's going to go in, it's going to retain, it's not going to form and morph. I know you've got the T-Rex arms holster that is Kydex, but it has like that padding. I keep reading the material of it,
Alcantara.
whatever that is exactly, because I
Yeah,
know
it's
I think of
car
like,
seat material.
okay, there we go. Car seat material, and I think of like crossbeat holsters where I feel like they probably got maybe inspiration from it, but I personally don't have a crossbeat holster. I have a friend who does. It's very comfortable because it's like Kydex on top of leather or a neoprene. The only problem with that is eventually that Kydex or I'm sorry, that leather or neoprene starts to kind of wear from being on your body, and then it starts being flimsy and kind of folds into. And once again, now you could ND yourself because of your holster. So that's where I'm not the biggest fan of something like that. So I would say get a good holster, something that retains your gun well, whatever your context is. Could be a concealed carry holster, or it can even be a outside the waistband holster for a competition, or if you want to go all the way to LARPing and getting a duty setup where you're getting like a Safari Land holster or Alien Gear, Rapid Force Gear holster, Tier 1 concealed, whatever it is, could get that level 2, level 3, level 1, etc. So holsters, just try to figure it out. I'm a There was a company out there called Wild Gunner, I believe, and they were a holster rental company. But I went on their website a week or two ago, and it disappeared.
Oh no. Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
wonder if they
which
went out of
stinks.
business.
They probably
Yeah.
did because I think it's such a great idea, but probably they weren't average because they're a very small company. Which I've had friends. That's what I recommended to buddies. I said, "Hey, rent your holsters, try it out," because most holsters, at least custom holsters, are not returnable. Like Tier 1 concealed, it is not returnable, it's not refundable, which is kind of sad because which is hilarious because you can go on eBay and you can see there are tons of Tier 1 concealed holsters on there, which I laugh but I'm sad about. I'm like, because they're great holsters, but for some people it just doesn't work for them. So because of that, a lot of people say they have a holster drawer of shame because they have
Oh
gone through
yeah,
so
I
many
have one.
holsters. Exactly. I have one. Thankfully, it's not as many as most people because I really did get lucky. I tried going the Amazon route at first, and that did not work for me. And then I kind of jumped into tier one as a leap of faith, and praise God, it worked for me. Like I exclusively use tier one concealed holsters for my concealed holsters now. I have three different holsters. I have had situations where my holster would crack or break, and I'd reach out to customer service, and they would send me a new one within a week, which is amazing. So awesome because they have a lifetime warranty. But I know there are other holsters, once again, like T-Rex arms. They're so great holsters. So holsters, there's that. Secondly, get a
Re-
good belt. Sorry, go for it.
real quick on holsters. The advice I was thinking about while we were
Yeah,
talking
yeah, yeah.
about
Go for
this
it.
was find somebody who has a similar body type that you do,
Yeah.
that you know that carries, and find out what has worked for them. They may still be on that journey to figure out something that works, but
hmm
a lot of times that really helps because everybody's got a different body type and size. Obviously, women differ from men, and then when men and women differ in height and then weight, and then like hip size, buttock size, all that kind of stuff. Like, do they have a belly? Do they not have a belly?
Yep.
Those kind of things are all stuff to consider. Also, somebody who's like your age. And I trying to find all that specifically, that may be tough. But you could also post on like Reddit or something like that, and you may get responses. 95% of them will probably be stupid, but you'll get that one person in there who's like, "Oh, hey, I am this exact same thing."
That's true. They might even. I know it's funny because like you mentioned, I love Amazon does this. I think Tier One might have it on their website, but I know on Amazon, whenever people would buy like clothes, right? Let's say a shirt or a jacket. Let's just say they bought a jacket, like a hoodie from Amazon. People in their reviews would actually say, "I am a male, 5'11", 200 pounds. I bought a large. This fits me perfectly."
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. That's really cool to at least see. It kind of gives you a general idea. And I think, I believe some holster websites would do that. If not, they should. I think they should include that in their reviews, in their comments. So this way, I think that would really help a lot of people out saying, yep, for me, I'd be like, I'm a 5'8". I am 210, 215 pounds. I'm more of a muscular build. I'm 5'8", and I have this holster and it fits me perfectly once I put a wedge on. This does not work for me without a wedge, but once I put a wedge on, fits perfectly. You know what I mean? This way, I think that could really help people out.
No, I definitely agree with that. Um, Other things to look at, real quick, is rounding out equipment, making sure you're getting good quality eye and ear protection.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, we live in an age where if you're looking at a good pair of ear protection, the Howard Lights
Yep.
are a great introductory set of ear protection. I'm a massive fan of having electric ear protection, which basically means that if you're at the range, you'll be able to hear everything around you, so you can hear people talking, which is a safety thing. But the moment that there's a gunshot, they cut out, right? So you don't damage your hearing, but you can still hear things around you. I am a massive fan of that. I'm a massive fan of the Howard Lights.
Yep.
I have a big head, so they don't tend to fit very well. I actually just bought a new pair of hearing protection today. I got a doctor's note just because I'm starting to get some tinnitus and just trying to solve that because I shoot a lot, right? And you can even do that too. Get a doctor's note by all means and get some custom hearing protection if you want, or
Mm-hmm.
buy some more expensive stuff. The Peltor also makes some pretty good low end, all the way up to high end range as well. But those are things that I would definitely trust. Again, Howard Light's your default to go to. I would
I
look at
agree.
them, and again,
I know.
second, then I would look at
Yeah.
3M Peltors.
Unfortunately, Howard lights have gone up a little in price. I think when I first got them, they're like $30. Now they're like 60. But
Oh, really?
once
I
again,
think I paid like 50 for mine.
no, I must have gotten an amazing deal for mine. I got mine for like 30
Maybe.
or 40
Well,
bucks.
yeah.
I was like crazy. I also got like my Target stands for like, I think 20 bucks a piece. Now they're like 40. I'm just really good at finding deals, at least back then. But either way, I also want to kind of set, I want to just, like you said, electronic hearing protection. Let's talk about, I want to say walkers. I know a lot of people like them. I'm not the biggest fan of the walkers over the years because they're in mono, whereas Howard
Mhm.
Lights and Peltors are stereo. One time, Phil and I were shooting together, and we're having a conversation. We're shooting, we're done, and then you said something, and you were on my right. I literally looked left because I thought, I don't know why, I heard in my brain thought you were on my left. So I look left, I'm like, oh snap, you're on my right. So that's another reason I'm not. I guess if you're like an instruction context, like it probably doesn't matter. But if you're trying to be a little more situationally aware, this way you kind of know where the person is, know what's going on, so you can be a little safer. And I think price wise, they're about the same anyway. And of course, you can go the route of in ears. I have a pair of Axel X cores, which I like. They're okay. I don't want to say they're my favorite in the world, but they're pretty good. I know you have the Walker in ears as well. So,
Yep, those work pretty. They're fine too. I like them in the summer. They're nice.
oh,
They do what
exactly.
they're supposed to
Great in
do.
the
The
summer.
audio quality could be better on them, but they're fine.
hmm Exactly. So, and of course, now going on to protection with PPE, you want good eye protection,
Hmm.
get a good pair of eyes, something that are probably more impact resistant, and also maybe something that's a little fog resistant as well. Because
Mm.
I've had eye protection where they'll, especially in the summer, man, they'll just fog right up, or even in the winter, because of course maybe it was sitting in my car for a little bit while I'm driving in my trunk. It gets cold. I put it on. My face is warm. My glasses are cold. Boom, fogs right up. So stuff like that. So what do you have? I don't really. I'm still trying to figure that out. I got I have a pair of eye protection that I got from an ex who worked at a PPE company. So I don't really know what to get because I actually am in the market of looking for better PPE. So what you got for me, Phil?
I use a pair of its Uvex brand. They're designed for like industrial work. So they have different like, I think it's ANSI scale for impact. And the other thing I like about them is they fit my head really well. I have a big old noggin. I'm a tall dude. So for me, it was actually took me probably 10 years to find them. And I
Nice.
read a review on Amazon that were like, hey, these are fit, all kinds of heads, especially a little bit bigger heads as well. They're super lightweight. You can get them in clear, yellow,
hmm
like sunglasses, like blue reflective, you name it. They're really cheap, like super inexpensive. But I've run them through all kinds of matches, bumped into stuff. I scratched the crap out of them. Didn't feel too bad about it because again, they were like maybe $5 to $7 for a pair of them.
hmm
And then they also one really nice feature that I like about them is most glasses will cover you from the front. These have little sections on the bottom sides of your like where the right or left of your face would be
Oh,
that
nice.
curve in slightly.
hmm
So you never know when you're going to get a ricochet off the ground of or like somebody hits steel and the jacket comes back at you, right? Now, most of the time you're going to be looking at the target they're shooting, but let's say you're reloading mags at a competition or something and you're looking up or down or whatever. It just offers a little bit extra protection. I've had stuff bounce off of that section before, so I was glad I had them. But
That's
those are
awesome.
the ones that I use, and I've had good success. And because I do scratch them from time to time, I've probably been through 5 pairs of them since I
Gotcha.
got them.
Do you
But
mind
I use them
sending
around
me
the
that
house.
link? Yeah. Do you mind sending me that link later on? Off
I will
script
definitely.
or
Yeah.
on script? I don't really care.
What we should do, Tyler, is we should really start collecting like a list of all this stuff, and then like
Yeah.
put it on the acceptable accuracy, like
So,
either Linktree or create a site or something.
yeah. So it's funny because I have had people in the past ask me, hey, what is your gear list? So I have a document with my gear list. So I don't know if you remember, one of our buddies recently asked, like, hey, what plate carrier do you have? Hey, what belt do you have? So then I literally just pasted my gear list, like, here you go. Because I made that list for somebody else years ago. I'm like, here you go.
Nice.
So this way it makes my life easier. This one I'm not compiling. It's like, boom. That's a good point, though. I do agree. It's like, hey, we could easily do something like that where people can at least see that. And it's like, hey, like these are our recommended things. And because we're not technically a business or LLC yet, we don't really have affiliate links. So I guess what we could do is probably just make like a, not a wish list, but what, you know what I mean? So that people can kind of say, I don't know. I'll figure it out. We'll
Sure.
figure
Yeah,
it
we'll
out
figure it
later.
out.
So, and yeah, so we talk about eyes, ears, holster. I briefly mentioned get a good belt. For the love of everything, get a good belt. Don't. A belt is going to be the foundation of your concealed carry. So I'm going to digress on that because I can talk about getting a good belt for like an hour. So anything else, Phil?
From a gear perspective, no, I think we've pretty much nailed it. Other than if you're looking at defensive ammo, make sure that you're purchasing
Yeah.
hollow points.
Yep.
Honestly, like there's a lot of ballistic tests out there. You're looking at Hornady Critical Defense or
Mm-hmm.
the Federal. I think the HSTs. I think is what you use. Is that
Yep.
correct, Tyler?
I
And then
specifically use Federal HST's 147 grain.
yep, Federal Punch. That's another one too.
Yep.
Any of those major brands that have a defensive labeled round are going to generally be pretty good.
Oh yeah.
Don't, despite what some people may say, don't carry ball ammo. Generally not a great idea from a performance perspective. It, yeah, use ball ammo to practice by all means. A lot cheaper.
100%. And also, too, Lucky Gunner does have on their website, I think FBI has it too, but the FBI did a ballistics testing of hollow point ammo. And I believe Lucky Gunner mimicked that, and they have all of their stats on their website. And they had probably like 20 or 30 different defensive ammos, and they showed what their results were like. And of course, feel free to check that out and also try out different rounds too and make sure that it actually runs well
Yeah.
in your gun and accurately. Make sure you actually have tight groupings.
Yep. 100% agree. So I guess Tyler, what's kind of like the final steps for somebody who they've done all this, they've done the like they've figured out like the safety, they've maybe purchased their first firearm, they want to work towards getting a CPL, they've got all the proper equipment and everything. What's
Hmm.
kind of that next step to get them to the direction of getting a CPL?
Take a class. That's a, that's all I got. Take a class. I don't know. What do you think?
I was just thinking of like, the whole continuing to go to the range thing. Make sure you're
Yeah,
comfortable
go
with the
exactly. Go.
firearm.
Yeah, I agree.
Find the drills, progress to the next level drills.
Hmm.
I am a true believer that if you look at like what a qualification requirements is, or you can call the like a range up or whoever's doing your CPL, be like, hey, what is the requirement from the shooting part of getting my CPL? Find out what that is, or find something online and then practice to that. And once you feel comfortable that you can successfully, safely, and accurately enough pass that test, then go get your CPL. Some people will say wait until you're more proficient. I'm a big fan of getting your CPL early on, even if you don't plan on carrying,
One hundred
because
percent.
in Michigan, especially, it offers you a lot of legal, uh, like it covers you legally better than not having it. So if you accidentally have your firearm in the front of your car or a magazine inserted into it, you're not
Hmm.
going to get in trouble with it.
Yeah,
Having it that
but
way,
let's
and
say you're
it's only
married
to
too.
pistol in Michigan. Yeah, if you're
Yeah,
married,
let's say you're
both your
married. Let's say
CPL,
yeah. Let's say your spouse has. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. But
you're good.
let's say your spouse is has a CPL and you don't. They leave their gun in the glove compartment. They forget about it. You're
Yep,
driving now without a CPL. You get pulled over. The cop
yep.
finds out you have a gun in there. Good luck.
Bad day for you.
Very bad day for you. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for the Second Amendment, but unfortunately, this is the age that we live in, and these are the laws of the state that we live in. And I would rather not get a felony on me because of an honest mistake. So, just
Yeah,
saying.
I would agree, and I think once you've arrived at the point where you feel comfortable taking your CPL, get your CPL. If you're in a state that's constitutional carry, still take a class. You don't have to necessarily take a CPL class, but maybe take an introduction to firearms. Whatever firearm platform you decide, whether it's pistol, rifle, shotgun. A lot of ranges will offer those, like privately owned ranges will offer those classes that you can take. And once you've got that CPL, you're kind of now at that point where you are progressing past beginner into like beginner plus, right?
You're
And
at
then you
level
can
one
start,
now.
yeah, you've leveled up. You can start looking at going to the range, introducing maybe some movement with your shooting as well. And then you
Hmm.
can start looking at things like the Range Day app from T-Rex Arms. T-Rex Arms, please sponsor us.
Yeah, I know,
Um,
right? I'm good with that
and
too.
yep, and then and again, just keep it up, keep going, and keep progressing. Go through like we talked about, the pistol 1, 2, and 3 with John Lovell.
Yep.
And then if you want to stop there and you want to focus on just concealed carry, by all means, that's great. But make sure you're keeping up your skills. But if you do want to progress past that, the next step would be moving into competitions. I know we
Hmm.
talk about that a lot, and that's a lot of our context. But realistically, there comes a point where you can only do so much by yourself at a flat range, that you need more
Hmm.
by dynamic experiences. Something like a USPSA is going to get you there really fast and accurate. IDPA will maybe a little bit more defensive associated, though I think IDPA can generate some bad habits as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, any other thoughts
And,
on that, Tyler, before
and,
we close out?
and I know I was kind of joking a little bit, but I am serious. Like, I've, I'm going to be slightly hypocritical here because I've actually never taken an organized trained course before.
Oh, you did through John Lovell, though, to work
His
with somebody.
online, but I'm talking about an actual in person
Sure.
with a
Yeah.
trained professional instructor beyond just a CPL instructor. Is I've never had that, which I would love.
I have not either, though.
But I would love that because once again, there is something about having. Because I even think of me personally. I have a life coach. I have a mentor, and I feel like I am further ahead today because I have him in my life, speaking truth into me and helping me out. Someone who's actually there, who sees me, who knows me, and who's able to help me make those fine tuned adjustments. Whereas an instructor will do that. A good instructor, whether it is like point one tactics or Modern Samurai Project or Warrior Post Society or T Rex Arms or any of these amazing guys. I don't know if T Rex Arms is an instructor, but either way, any of these people who actually having hands on being with them and they can show, like, maybe for us, like, we're thinking, like, okay, I'd say, you say I'm an advanced shooter, but these guys are like advanced plus shooters. And I would love to get to there
Well, they're
because
professional shooters, yeah.
they're professional shoes. Exactly. They're
Yep.
professional shoes. I'm an advanced shooter. I would love for them to help me fine tune where I'm at to be better because I think of like tier one concealed. These guys are significantly better shooters than I am. And I would love to take a class with them because they are better shooters than me for a reason. So I'd love to be with that. So now having that instructor eye, that instructive feedback, that would be huge help. So I would highly encourage take a class. I would like to as well eventually with any of those guys that I've mentioned. So, but other than that, I think those were our closing thoughts. So now, Philip, what's your dad advice?
My dad advice, and kind of along what you said of finding a mentor, is to find a group of people that you can trust and go out and shoot with them, have conversations with them around what works with them, what doesn't work for them from like a concealed carry perspective. Grow that firearms community, and it can be tough
Mm-hmm.
because, like we talked about earlier, there's a lot of people that are guys especially are guilty of this the whole machismo thing, like it can be tough, right? But I will guarantee you that if you're at a church that is probably more on the conservative side, there's probably going to be a group of individuals that shoot together. Find that group and go shooting with them,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to create friends that you'll have for life, and you'll have friends that you'll go out in the early December months to go shooting with in the snow, which is literally what we're doing tomorrow.
We are doing that, which now I think we have like six people going tomorrow from the looks of it.
Yeah. So I guess just to recap on my advice is find a community that you can, a positive community associated with firearms that you can, even if it's online,
Yep.
that you can associate with, learn from, and then down the road, you can bring other people into, and you can help the next generation of shooters learn how to shoot for the first time.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's fun. Don't get me wrong. I love it. I was able to help someone. We had our man camp recently, and actually helped two
Man camp.
guys. I know, right? We had two guys who one of them I know for sure was his first time ever shooting, and it was really fun helping him through the process of that. How he was scared. He was scared. He was nervous, and by the end of it, he's like laughing. He's like, "Oh, this is awesome!" So it's a good. It's an awesome feeling.
So, Tyler, what's your advice
So my
for our
advice,
listeners?
yeah, because I'm not a dad, so I'm just giving advice.
Yeah.
So my advice is it's not related to anything that we spoke about, but it's also realizing how, remember this, you cannot read their mind. You cannot. just know that you cannot control the other person, but you can always control your actions and your reactions to however you are treated.
That's legit.
That's
That's
my
true.
advice. Hmm.
Yeah, and I guess along those lines too is you can help somebody improve, but they have to want to improve.
100%. I've tried to help people who did not want my help, and whether in life or even in firearms and shooting, I'm like, all right, hey, you do you, and they have to come to that conclusion on their own. Which, funny enough, there was a situation where I was helping someone who he's a newish shooter, and he took a CPL class already, and I could already see some bad habits, and I'm like, hey, why don't you try this instead? It's like, yeah, I'm gonna keep doing this. I'm like, all right, whatever. Which, funny enough, a year later, now he starts doing what I was trying to help him to do. I'm like,
Yeah.
there we go. So, but
Now,
cool.
on the flip side of that coin, real quick, Tyler, is there's going to come a point in your life, and this is a general you, and it may have happened to you, the listener, already. Somebody is going to come to you and ask for help and advice.
Mm-hmm.
That is probably one of the greatest honors that you can have as a human
One
when
hundred
somebody
percent.
comes to you for advice. And you'll be surprised about how much you will learn when you are teaching.
Oh my goodness, yes, so true.
Yep.
I'm a firm believer of you do not truly understand your the information until you're able to actually teach it.
Agreed.
Hmm.
So sweet. With that, we ask you to like, subscribe, and comment to any of our social media platforms or on our website, any of the podcasting locations. We are on the Firearms Radio Network. I'll be doing some expanded work, hopefully with them over the holiday weekend. I've just had a chance to sit down and kind of shore some stuff up. But we've got more episodes along the new shooter progression. Next, I think we're going to talk about how to get your CPL and what the importance of that is with a couple CPL instructors we've had on before, Britt and Daryl. Anything else I'm forgetting, Tyler, to
That's
close
about
this
it.
out with?
Remember to like, comment, subscribe, email us at acceptableaccuracy@gmail.com. Have your questions, review us, and we're looking forward to it. Hope you guys had an amazing Thanksgiving and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Amen, brother.